So on this beautiful day in this beautiful world, I am grateful to be here with you. Please just know that whoever you are and wherever you've been this morning, you're entirely welcome here. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter. Truly, we see the Spirit of Christ in all beings. And so this topic of being a compassionate conduit is particularly helpful for me today as I look at all that's going on in our wonderful world and all of the beautiful people in it. The conduit part is where we allow the divine aspects of ourselves, the absolute good, the absolute, what in the Christian tradition is called, let the mind of Christ be within you. We're letting that pour through us out into the world as a healing presence. And that's part of what we do in our tradition. Whether we call it our Buddha nature or Christ consciousness or the Divine Mother speaking through each and every one of us. It simply is who we are. And what we do is allow all of that energy to pour through us so that we don't get exhausted trying to love everybody. We just let it be. So that we are the compassionate conduits, and part of what that requires is a new way of thinking about how we are in the world. That is a claiming of our power, that is claiming our authority to choose the world we would create, and then create it, and recognize that we do have that power, and we do have that authority inherent in us, hence the name of the talk, the authority to choose. So it seems like we've had a couple days worth of different holidays, or we have a couple different holidays right now that are going on that all have us looking backward, back to our ancestors and honoring them. And that is right and proper. What we're going to do this morning is allow ourselves to recognize that our ancestors or our old thinking, as much as we love and honor them, may not serve us for this moment or going forward. So with all the honor and love in the world, we have to choose our own thoughts and how we're going to be in this world that we're creating. You know, it's interesting that in what we would call the East, in the Oriental religions, the monad religions, meaning like Hinduism and Buddhism and so forth, there is in those cultures something of a caste system. And so where you're born is where you will be for that whole life. And you don't get to rise up or transcend it until your next life. In what we here in the West would call the Western traditions, or the Abrahamic religions or Abrahamic religions, we have strong class divisions. In the medieval period, there was the nobility, which was all chosen by the king, and he was chosen by God, theoretically. Then you had the gentry, who didn't have a title, but might have a lot of money and therefore might own land. Then you might have rich merchants, people who would be called yeomen, who might have a small farm that they were actually allowed to own. They might be servants in a very rich house. And then there were the peasants or tenant farmers and wage laborers. They were not allowed to own land. They were only allowed, in some cases, they were only allowed to work the land that they were born onto. And so all around the world, there have been long traditions of, you better bloom where you're planted because you're not allowed to move, and you're not allowed to do anything that your family hasn't been doing for a long, long time. I will tell you, I tried to research some of the indigenous traditions and pre-colonial Africa. I could spend another 20 minutes on that, but I only have 20 minutes total. So apologies for the great big wide net I'm casting. Here's the thing. That kind of bloom where you're planted thinking is wonderful in the moment because we can practice gratitude for wherever it is we are. But it can also lead us to some funky belief systems where we think it's not okay to ask for more. It's not okay to allow change. It's not okay to have a closer relationship with a divine being who wants us to have more. But in our tradition, literally in our textbook on page 25, it says the divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Bondage, whether it's to a belief system or a place or a job or a caste, is not God ordained. We humans decided to run the experiment and try it on. There were good things about it. It might have worked for us for a while. It's not working for us quite as well. We have this new idea called democracy. And as we go to the poll, if you've already mailed in your ballot, if you've already mailed in or delivered your ballot and had it accepted as I have, then yay us. If you are going to the polls on Tuesday, then God and Goddess bless you and thank you for doing your part. This is who we are and what we do here in America, is we go to the polls on Tuesday and we have the authority, the right, and yes, it's also something of a privilege to choose who our leadership is. Now, we still have to participate in the process. We still have to keep going. It's not just a one-day-a-year job. But we have this wonderful opportunity to create for ourselves a wonderful world. And this is just one small slice of what we do. We choose to do it prayerfully, which is why I have reposted the way to get into the prayer and meditation room on Zoom that will be going on from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Election Day. When we choose to do any activity as religious scientists, we choose to do it consciously, letting go of the old way of thinking and seeing what serves us in this moment so that we're not holding on to old traditions that no longer serve us. And there's kind of a caveat that goes with that, because often especially in foundations, I will often say that this teaching should come with some, the little ink on the bottom or that lawyer's voice that's speaking very quickly during the commercial. Ernest Holmes, who is our founder, also wrote, the moment you step out of the ordinary ranks, that is the moment you get conscious and start doing this stuff consciously, the moment you step out of the ordinary ranks, the moment you step out of the procession that moves endlessly down the aisle, you are in the spotlight of evolution. Your own choice has decided you, and you're no longer going to think as others. Your own choice has decided you, and you're no longer going to think as others. So yes, some of your old relationships might fall away. Some of your old relationships might take on a whole new life as your friends and family join you in this process of evolution. But it should be noted that some of your relationships might have to end. Some of your ways of thinking might have to end. And something that has been going on for generation after generation after generation is the older generation looks at and judges the newer generation. I wish they'd just sit down and behave. I wish they would stop being so badly behaved. I wish they would respect the elders and just listen to us and do as they're told. It has not worked in generations to say that to the younger generations. It has never worked. So that's one of the old behaviors that I personally am trying not to engage in. So when I say kids today, and I kind of roll my eyes, generally what I'm trying to do is say, wow, they're awesome. They're smarter than I was at their age. They are dealing with a lot different world than I did at their age. And so I lift them up and I do what we call praising and raising of the new ideas that are coming into form. This is how I stay current. This is how I stay youthful in my mind. It's an experiment. I'm running it. We'll see how it works. Here's the thing. There have been magnificent souls who were willing to do that, stepping out of the ordinary ranks over history. Jesus himself, who we call the master teacher, who gave us the great example of how to live in this world. He disappeared from his family while on a trip. Mom's freaking out, dad's freaking out, the whole caravan has to turn around. and come back, and they found him in the temple teaching. This little kid is teaching. Well, actually, in his place and time, he was probably considered almost a young adult. But he's there teaching the rabbis. And he gets called on it by his mother, and he says, "Why are you surprised to see me here?" Apparently, the next line that was cut out of the Bible was, "Have you met me?" Because that's what he did. That's what he was there to do. Joan of Arc, since we're heading into All Saints' Day, Joan of Arc, who was born in 1412, started hearing voices at the age of 13. She believed it was the voice of God that was telling her to set her country free. They were stuck in a long, long war. It had been a mess, and her country was suffering terribly. So at the age of 17, she went and got herself through this war-torn country to the person she thought should be king, and he said, "Sure, go, lead my army." What it doesn't talk about was how annoyed her father was with her, because she had heard these voices and she felt committed to it, that wedding that he had set up for her when she was 16, it was his right and his job to get her well married. She got out of it by saying she had taken a vow of celibacy while she was doing what was hers to do. It was not easy. I mean, the least of her problems was the fact that she wore white armor and rode a white horse in the midst of a war. Do you know how hard it must have been to stay clean? She actually was taken by the enemy and died at the age of 19, burned at the stake. One of her great sins, one of the 70 or so charges against her, was dressing like a man. Can you imagine anyone today getting in trouble for dressing like a man? I get to wear pants. I'm gonna do it. I'm not worried when people light fires near me. It's not for me. This is a new thought that we have moved into. There was a young man who, at the age of 17, during World War II, formed a resistance group. And I'm going to try and say his name right. It was Jacques Louis Serron, who in the spring of 1941, at the age of 17, started defying the occupying Nazis. It was his job to vet everybody coming into this incredibly secret circle. And he did this. It was his job to take a look at all of them, ironically, even though he had been blind since the age of 7. He had been in an accident. It was this new energy, this fresh young person who was not gonna be limited by his age or his ability to see, that was willing to step up and move his country forward, move into that greater freedom that we say is our divine inheritance. Now, he was betrayed and sent to Buchenwald at the age of 19. He was one of the lucky few who survived, went on to teach French literature here in America. He was an amazing soul, but it was not an easy step for him to take. Recently, here in America, in Florida, we have the Parkland teenagers who did #NeverAgain, who took a look at the world they were living in, where they were risking their lives, they felt, just by going to school. And they decided they couldn't wait for the adults to get it right. And they took on some of the most powerful groups in the country, including the NRA, including Washington. And they started moving us forward to at least come up with some solution. As a matter of fact, here in our movement, in the New Thought movement, it was the teenagers who took a look at how we were practicing our philosophy and said, we're out of alignment, guys. We're outside of our own integrity. We teach oneness. And yet we have two groups. We had Religious Science International and United Church of Religious Science, who taught the same book by the same person using the same curriculum, but each side said that they were doing it right. And the teenagers just weren't having it. Now, they annoyed the heck out of the elders. All of these youth have annoyed the heck out of the elders. That's what they're here to do. They're here to have a new thought. And because they are young, because they don't have a mortgage and a career and all sorts of other stuff to lose, like some of us more mature, I won't say elderly, some of us more mature thinkers, because they don't have as much to lose, they are able to be more honest about their own behavior and their own thinking and their own forward movement. Now, if this is what's going on the outside, then it's also what's going on the inside for each of us. We have this part of us that wants to remember that principle is not bound by precedent, that we are absolutely at choice to create and recreate our world without that committee in the back of our head saying that we younger thoughts and our new thoughts are somehow unworthy of being considered. We have 1,000 different, okay, I'm going to clean this up. I have 1,000 different ways of getting out of having to live by my new thinking. Sometimes I'll walk around singing, if you're happy and you know it, overthink. If you're happy and you know it, overthink. If you're happy and you know it, then your brain will surely blow it. If you're happy and you know it, overthink. And so I second guess myself. Nobody else does that, right? If you're laughing right now, you're doing it too, probably. We wait for the other shoe to drop. Things are going so well. This stuff works. Everything is going great. It can't possibly last, right? It can't possibly be this good. This is too good to be true. And so we wait for the other shoe to drop. We wait for it all to fall apart. And because we're affirming that this is not going to last, guess what? We create all of it falling apart. I suggest that we take that mouthy kid inside of us and trust him or her or them. Trust that they actually still have some fire in them. And if you are one of the mouthy kids, for the love of all that is holy, please don't stop rabble-rousing. Please stand up and speak your truth. It is not by accident that Hamilton is one of the big crazes in the country right now. It's an old story being told in a new way so that we look at it differently. It honors the past, but it speaks those ideas in a new voice and makes them fresh and young. And if you can rap that particular song, Guns and Ships, then more power to you. I cannot do that. So we choose our lives. It's part of who we are. It's part of what we do in this philosophy. And let me paint a picture for you. What if we all let go of this belief in separation? We get rid of the belief that if one wins, the other has to lose. If I have enough, it means somebody else cannot have enough. What if we let go of all of those old beliefs and built the world that works for everyone? And we all had the pride and the self-esteem that comes of doing that which our heart and soul knows is ours to do. We risk standing up and being unpopular for a moment. We risk calling in our own greatness. We risk temporarily upsetting friends and family by calling them into their greatness, by saying we absolutely practice inclusivity, and whether that's both or all political parties and opinions, or we choose to bring in all of those minority voices, whoever has been silenced in the past, we choose to listen now. Whatever that might be, incredibly, we create the world that works for everyone, in which people like the Nazis get defeated, not just back in 1941, but now in this country, when people who want to follow their own hearts and have a strong enough faith to get up and walk through a war-torn country and go talk to the person we think should be in charge. If we have that kind of faith, we can do this because we have the authority to make that decision and then act on it. Every one of us has that authority within us. And so I'll just remind you of that now. and read you the rest of that quotation right before we go into prayer, which is how we speak our word. We speak with the voice of authority in prayer and claim our good. And I ask you to contemplate these words. The divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul, and all instinctively feel this. The truth points to freedom under the law. Thus, the inherent nature of man is forever seeking to express itself in terms of freedom. We do well to listen to this inner voice, for it tells us of a life wonderful in its scope, of a love beyond our fondest dreams, a freedom which the soul craves. And so now in this moment, I ask you to join me in consciousness. Go within in whatever way works for you and take these words as it feels appropriate as your own. The great love that is life, the great being that we sometimes call God, is fully present here and now. It is the divine pattern after which we are all made. It has taken form as all of us. It is that sense of freedom. It is that still small voice or that shouting voice that speaks of a greater love, of a greater truth. It speaks of oneness with the Father, Mother God. It speaks of our ability to go forth and create the world that works for everyone, because it's all within the divine being. I speak my word on behalf of every being, everyone, everywhere, every when. As I speak the truth of who we are one with the infinite good. And so what is ours to do is be a conduit for that massive, infinite love. Allow it to pour through us into the world, to soak into every pore of our being, and be the truth of our own magnificent souls, and live from that, act from that, speak from that. Allow that truth to speak us, and it's a message of love and unity and peace. I know that this is how we step into kingdom of heaven here on earth, simply by allowing spirit to do what it does, what it has always been doing, and how allow it to work according to natural laws. We don't even have to make it happen. We just let it. We allow it to be. And so with a grateful heart, I do step out of the way and allow this all to be. I call it good and very good. And if this has landed with you, I ask you to affirm with me. And so it is.